Hello. You've probably heard about this climate crisis thing. It's supposed to be really bad. It's so bad that people seek counseling for eco-anxiety. Others take up doomsday prepping, while others still give up entirely.
I would say that it's all pointless and useless if you take the larger picture, like the dying planet.
Oh, come on. It can't be that bad, right? It's all pointless. Have you tried just, enjoying yourself? Like, for instance, playing a video game, or reading a book, or perhaps writing a book if you're so inclined, or play the guitar. Or get laid every once in a while. We've made doomsday predictions before, but we're still here. How bad can the climate crisis be? Before we start, I should stress that I'm not a professional science person. I'm one of those useless humanities people putting a strain on the economy, and even though nobody has ever misrepresented science before on the internet, I would hate to be the first. So I'm therefore leaving it to one of the eminent science communicators of our age to put our current predicament in restrained, objective, skeptical, rational, dispassionate, moderate, scientific terms. Take it away.
The planet's on fucking fire.
Thank you, Bill. Just a second. I need to check my notes because there must be some kind of mistake. Let's go through the basics, shall we? The Earth and the Sun. The Earth has an atmosphere. The atmosphere protects the Earth against the Sun. In the atmosphere, we have the so-called greenhouse effects. I'm sorry for the burnt out part there. I wish my lighting equipment was better. In the atmosphere, we have greenhouse gases, such as CO2, methane, nitrous oxide, water vapor, and others. They help keep the Earth happy. But there are more greenhouse gases in the atmosphere now, for some reason. And that makes the Earth sad. And if you want more detail than that, then read a NASA article! I'll link to one in the doobly-doo. And yeah, the whole dismissive, how bad can a climate crisis be shtick was fake and performative. You see, I pulled a sneaky on you. The answer to that question is very, very, very bad. So, with the basics out of the way, let's stop beating about the bush and talk about feedback loops. Yay! A feedback, according to Wikipedia, occurs when outputs of a system are routed back as inputs as part of a chain of cause and effect that forms a circuit or loop. The system can then be said to feed back into itself. I know, it's a mouthful. So let me instead explain by way of a few examples. As the planet has gotten hotter, wildfires have gotten more common, and when trees burn, they release carbon, which contributes to global warming, which makes the planet hotter, which causes more wildfires,
which releases carbon, which contributes to global warming, which makes the planet hotter, which causes more wildfires, which releases carbon, which contributes to global warming, which makes the planet hotter, which makes wildfires more common, which releases carbon, which contributes to global warming, which makes the planet hotter, which causes wildfires, which releases carbon, which contributes to global warming, which makes the planet hotter, which causes more wildfires, which releases carbon, which contributes to global warming, which makes the planet hotter, which causes more wildfires.
Are you starting to see the picture? It's a loop. Maybe one more example will do it. As the planet has gotten hotter, permafrost, which is soil that is frozen all year round, has started to thaw. Which makes you wonder if we should even be calling it permafrost anymore. Aside from being semantically confusing, this is also very inconvenient for the people who live on top of permafrost. And it's also very inconvenient for everybody else, because permafrost contains a lot of carbon. 1.5 trillion tons of it. And as the permafrost thaws, this gets emitted. Some of it as methane, which is a much more potent greenhouse gas than CO2. So, a warmer planet melts permafrost, which releases carbon, which contributes to global warming and makes the planet hotter, and melts permafrost and releases carbon and contributes to global warming and makes the planet hotter, and melts permafrost and releases carbon and contributes to global warming and makes the planet hotter, and melts permafrost and releases carbon and contributes to global warming and makes the planet hotter, and melts permafrost and releases carbon and contributes to global warming and makes the planet hotter, and melts permafrost and releases carbon and contributes to global warming and makes the planet hotter. You get it, right? It's a loop. You're a clever cookie. But the rule of threes forces me to do another example, so... Let's finish with a non-carbon forcing, i.e. something that contributes to global warming but doesn't in itself add more carbon to the atmosphere. You know how in the summer if you wear a white t-shirt it helps you cool down, but if you wear a black one you're just boiling? Well, the same idea applies to the Earth. Glaciers, ice sheets, snow, they're bright white surfaces which reflect sunlight back into space. This is called the albedo effect, and it also makes the Earth happy. The Earth is like Goldilocks. It likes things neither too cold nor too hot. But you can probably guess where I'm going with this by now. As the planet has gotten hotter, this ice has started to melt and reflect less sunlight back into space, which makes the planet hotter and melts more ice and reflects less sunlight and makes the planet hotter and melts more ice and reflects less sunlight and makes the planet hotter and melts more ice and reflects less sunlight and makes the planet hotter and melts more ice and reflects less sunlight and makes the planet hotter and melts more ice and reflects less sunlight and makes the planet hotter. You guess, like, we've done 3 examples, so this is especially troubling for the Arctic, where most of the ice floats on water. As this ice melts, and for illustration's sake, here are 2 pictures, one from September 1984 and one from September 2019, dark waters underneath the ice gets exposed and absorbs sunlight, like a black t-shirt. And this additional heating helps melt Greenland, since it's so close by, which contributes to sea level rise and could even mess up the Gulf Stream. Melting Arctic sea ice could also trigger the release of methane from permafrost. Because remember, what happens in the Arctic does not stay in the Arctic. I know that's a play on what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but that's not really true even for Vegas. I mean, gambling debts, STDs, and nuclear radiation doesn't stay in Vegas. Anyway, this goes to show that these feedbacks don't operate in isolation. Everything's stuck together. Trigger one of these and the rest could fall like dominoes. And the melting of the ice sheets is going disconcertingly fast. In the words of one climatologist, It's a century ahead of schedule. And he said this in 2005. The good news is that these feedbacks are usually not taken into account by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC. The bad news is, well, that. It means that projections taking us to 3 to 4 degrees by the end of the century could be off by a few decades, or degrees, depending on how you look at it. This is summed up well in What Lies Beneath. No, not the movie. It's by Breakthrough. No, not Breaking Benjamin. Breakthrough. No, that's a super obscure band I didn't know about until I decided to make this joke. Gee, I hope they're not problematic in any way. I'm too lazy to find out. It's a report. Bingo! According to this report, the IPCC has a history of underestimating the rates of sea level rise, Arctic sea ice melt, and methane emission from permafrost. The IPCC is based on a consensus model, i.e., the most amount of people need to agree on the most amount of things. So, outlier findings projecting extreme outcomes tend to be overlooked, leading to what Naomi Oreskes has called consensus by omission, even when these findings later turn out to have been right all along. The gravest criticism of the IPCC by people actually qualified to criticize them is not that they're hysterical fearmongers, but rather that they underestimate the risks and err on the side of least drama. So far, the global average temperature has increased by 1 degree centigrade since pre-industrial times. We've set a target to limit global warming to 2 degrees and try really hard to limit it to 1.5. But feedbacks complicate this picture. Permafrost melt alone could add another half degree by the end of the century. And we don't really know when these feedbacks will be triggered. But the risk, predictably enough, goes up the higher the temperature increases. Even the targets of the Paris Agreement could be enough to set these off. Hell, there are even some scientists saying that 1.5 is enough to reach a tipping point concerning the Siberian tundra. I wish I'd written more jokes. I feel like this video has gotten way too dry and serious and depressing and boring and other negative adjectives. So, to lighten the mood, things that bother you never bother me. I feel happy and fine, living in the sunlight, loving in the moonlight, having a wonderful time. Haven't got a lot, I don't need a lot, coffee's only a dime. Living in the sunlight, loving in the moonlight, having a wonderful time. Now, I should take the opportunity to dispel a popular misconception about feedback loops, and that is that once we reach a tipping point and set them off, that we will experience an extreme jump in temperature in a matter of years. That's not true. If we set them off, the additional emissions and warming would probably be gradual, and it would take centuries or even millennia for them to fully play out. But they would probably be irreversible though, which is... that's bad enough. I recommend the site Climate Tipping Points for more info. Still, despite these caveats, it seems to me that our real deadline for dealing with the climate crisis is not 2100 or 2050 or even 2030, the years we usually talk about when we talk about this stuff, but rather whenever we reach a point where the climate system just goes, okay, thanks for the help, I can take it from here, bye, and we get runaway climate change. Now, all this is kind of abstract in general. Like, I've been talking about feedback loops and tipping points and carbon and numbers and stuff. But what are the concrete consequences of all this? What would happen in a worst case scenario? What would happen with 3 to 4 degrees of warming? Or hell, what are the consequences today, right now? Well, I'm sure you've heard of or maybe even experienced some of them yourself. Like the aforementioned wildfires, stronger storms, freak weather events becoming so frequent that you can't really call them freak events anymore, droughts and floods, drought and then a flood, because climate change is kind of an asshole. What's that? Is it drought? No. People are starving? You're starving to death? And you want some rain? You want some rain for your precious little crops? Is that it? Yeah? So you can grow some food? Well, guess what? I'm gonna give you all the rain you want. It's just gonna be raining and raining and raining and raining and raining. I've been saving this up for you guys. And raining and raining. Rain, baby, rain, yeah. Dance in the rain because you're happy that there's so much rain, yeah. What's that? There's too much rain? But I thought you said you wanted rain. Unbelievable. You're just so ungrateful. Like, yeah, I'm trying to be nice here. And you're just like, The same institute behind the What Lies Beneath report also released a report called Existential Climate-Related Security Risk, a Scenario Approach. Catchy title there. The report describes what could happen in a worst-case scenario where the climate system is more sensitive than we thought, warming happens faster than anticipated, emissions don't peak until 2030, and we reach tipping points and set off feedback loops. The report posits that in such a scenario, human civilization could end by 2050 and descend into a state of outright chaos where political panic becomes the norm. Their words, not mine. Most projections take us to 3 to 4 degrees of warming by the end of the century. What would that be like? Well, renowned climatologist Kevin Anderson said that a world with 4 degrees of warming is incompatible with an organized global community, is likely to be beyond adaptation, is devastating to the majority of ecosystems, and has a high probability of not being stable. And the carrying capacity of such a world? Estimated to be less than 1 billion people. You've heard me right. If the world heats by another 3 degrees, it would mean less than 1 billion people could live on it. And you might be aware that we're currently at 7 billion people, and projections by the UN takes us to 10 billion by mid-century. So, simple math tells us that 6 to 9 nice, billion people could die. By starvation, by thirst, by war, by heat stroke, by floods, by natural disasters. Do you feel confident that you would be in that 1 billion people that survive? Because I personally don't. I'm a useless humanities person, remember? I wouldn't survive a day in the post-apocalypse, despite having logged over 200 hours on Fallout 3 back in the day. I do remember from Fallout that you better have a dog, so got that covered. Oh, yeah. Now, of course, scientists saying that the carrying capacity of a 4-degree world is less than 1 billion people could, of course, be wrong. But consider it if they're even just half right. calm down, calm down. Everybody relax. The carrying capacity of a 4-degree world isn't 1 billion people. It's actually 3. Billions of people are still gonna die though. Okay, we're reaching the end, so let me stress that climate disaster is not a foregone conclusion. The 1.5 target set by the UN is still geophysically possible, to use the terminology of the IPCC. It does, however, give one pause that we recently set the doomsday clock 100 seconds to midnight. The closest it's ever been. That was heavy, wasn't it? All because of more carbon in the atmosphere. Funny that. But why is there more carbon in the atmosphere now? Gee, I don't know. What could possibly be the reason? That is the subject of the next video. So stay tuned. Until then, things that bother you never bother me. I feel happy and